Everybody talks about drone swarms, but very few people actually stop to ask what that means, how the AI behind it works, and where the advantages end and the disadvantages begin. If you think a swarm is just a bunch of drones flying together, you're missing the point. A true swarm is a collective behavior emergent from AI and communications, not just numbers. So today we're going to break down what that really looks like and why it matters when you're trying to design systems that don't break under battlefield stress and conditions. Welcome to the Swarm News. This is the show where veterans and engineers talk about defensive tech the way it actually works, not the way it's sold on PowerPoint. If your systems only shine in clean simulations, we are not impressed. I'm Joshua Hill.
And I'm Vincent Lewis. And again, we'd like to say thank you for all those who have followed and subscribed and liked our content. If you haven't, we'd like to ask you to come back, watch our content. If you have anything that you want us to cover or go over, please put it in the comments and below. And also, if you enjoy what we have and we're putting out, we'd like you to also like, follow, and subscribe. With that being said, I don't really have any updates for today in regards to anything that's changed yet. Um, in regards to updated news, so once we have something else that's kind of come out that's relevant, we'll put out some updates and things that's going on. With that being said, it's back to you, Josh.
All right, sounds good. So let's start with the idea of a hive. People throw around the term like it's just jargon. The reality is a swarm isn't a single brain. It's many units sharing information, coordinating decisions, and responding to change collectively. For operators, that looks like multiple assets adjusting without direct commands, resilience to single point failures, redundancy. But for designers, that looks like communication, decentralization logic, real time adaptations, emergent behavior, and emergency is not the same as a perfect control.
Yeah, and when you take into consideration the systems in a system perspective, swarms are a distributed decision making system. So you could have one head node, but if that system goes down, you have others that can come along and that will be deciding who will be the next one up. And there are three bod classes that goes into discussing, how that works. And it goes by centralized control, which is one control directs everyone and not just a uh, true swarm is in regards to that one system or the one aircraft or whatever the main node is will control everything in general. Then you have decentralized where it shares everything and elements are shared and some of the autonomy is shared or commands and autonomy is shared. And in that aspect of it is that you have still kind of a node that works as the main and it can completely disseminates what information it has. But as those aircraft are working as a whole, they all correlate their commands together and also their situations they recognize. So if one's recognizing that it's flying in the clouds, it'll give the rest of it saying, oh, there's clouds to the left. Or say there is a rain, it can tell it, and then they all sense it and they work together, sharing that communication. And then you have an intelligence swarm, which is individual units that can communicate on their own and they can work in autonomously or simultaneously together. So basically, in this aspect of it is every aircraft is its own node and it can communicate with the rest of it, but it can operate completely autonomous to what the rest of the swarm is doing. So in this regard, it truly becomes a intelligence system where it can recognize, hey, there's a threat down here. Hey, I'm the next closest one to go to it. I'll communicate to go do or take out that target or go function to do what it needs to for that part. Whereas the others can also recognize and understand and give support as needed and communicate what they're seeing and communicate in a way to where they can still work independently, but as a team together. And it kind of separates all your three categories, which is repeated centralized control, which is one main head, decentralized, which is a shared communications or shared commands and autonomy, and then the intelligence swarm, where all the systems within that can all work independently on their own. And that kind of brings your categories all into one, big in general idea. So um, it helps to keep that complexity as they understand what we are.
So with all of those, I mean, if you were to choose one to use, which one do you think you'd go with? Like, what's the most beneficial?
I mean, the intelligent one would be the best that you can go with, but the autonomy of things right now, it's getting there. Don't get me wrong. It's more than likely in some cases it's probably already there. But if you could have the best of the best system, I would want the intelligence swarm, because now I don't have to communicate with having one central node that every time one goes down, something's next one up. So the next man up kind of thing. Whereas you kind of think of that in football, where your best linebacker leading the team goes down, and it's like you gotta wait till the next person comes in. Whereas if it's everybody's on the same level within like an intelligence swarm situation, it doesn't matter who goes down. They're all built the same. They all can do the same exact job, no matter who's in the position. It's just the closest to that. So if you consider it as a um, simplified situation where, say, you're out over a area where there's a hurricane that's hit, and you have 20 of these aircraft that are all creating a site picture of roads, infrastructure, things, and what's been hit, where one aircraft could be out and it's functioning, and it sees that there's a firefighter coming up, or in this case, there's an individual who's on the ground who needs help. As it's doing its duties of saying, determining what's going on around the area, it can go help and support the person and communicate back. Whereas if you had other systems that have to be incorporated into going from one to another, going back and forth in that information, it can't react. You have some time costs that go with it. So having it where it can do it is good, but then at the same time, if you need that aircraft to not do or diverge from what you're doing, in this case, if it's going out to actually um, identify open roads, or it's identifying paths that are blocked in any other situations, and it's just needing to do that. Granted, it can make note of what that situation is, but it needs to be able to continue its mission, because it's more important to do that. That's where the centralized comes into play.
Okay.
Centralized is more of where it's helpful, but it's like you really don't care. You're having it to where one's leading the pack. It's like the B-17 situation. They're kind of like more so decentralized also, but if it's centralized where you have one commander guiding the whole flock of people to where they need to go, and if they go down, it's the next one. It you need some determinations in it, but if you just need them just to follow, then that's one thing too. So it takes a lot less
Mhm.
communication need and also bandwidth to do all this. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, no, that helps. So let's be clear for our about the upsides. Swarm behavior, when it works, offers scalability. One operator can influence redundancy. Losing one doesn't collapse the whole mission. You can still function. Flexibility, task units can switch roles on the fly. Swarm formations, improving coverage, area, saturation, and persistence. In some conflicts, we surrogate swarm concepts, dozens of inexpensive UASs working together to overwhelm a defense. And that's not trivial. That's just where we're headed. And that's the way you kind of where we're headed. Like, put as much out there and overwhelm the enemy, and
Yeah.
there's not much they can do about it.
Correct. And kind of to back you up on those different behaviors, like when you look at scalability, if one person, when you think about it in an operator sense, when a operator is actually controlling, say, 50 aircraft, and that ability for that aircraft to actually think on its own is very helpful. But at the same time, if imagine you had to have 50 aircraft to go do something, and you're now also looking to see if that aircraft that's completely autonomous is doing its part, how overwhelming that could be if you're trying to figure it out for 25 to 50 aircraft to see
Right.
one makes a decision to determine, hey, there's an opportunity mission that I need to go take. And you're like, no, I need you to keep going, and then having to make the changes as you're still also trying to update yourself on what's going on operationally as it's going into a contested area. And that redundancy also is very helpful for a operator who say is now getting that information and back to him, say, hey, this one's working, and then you can see that the other ones, this one goes down, but the other one kind of picks up for itself. It's helpful versus on the opposite side, you got 50 operators. Now, each one of those people are controlling those aircraft. Granted, you may be the head, but at the same time, if they're doing something and they're trying to update you with all this information, how that also becomes more of a problem because now you got,
Overwhelming.
yeah, it can be overwhelming if you got 50 people trying to say, hey, or not this case, you have 50, but say you have two or three that are running into a problem that they're like, hey, what altitude did you say? Hey, I'm at 50. Are you at 100? Or are you at 25? Or I'm at this, or I'm having this problem with my transmitter, or I'm having this problem with the flight controller, or I'm having blah blah blah. Granted, there's procedures in place, but then when you get emergency situations, that's where whoever is the person in charge or whoever that person is having the emergency situation, now it goes to them. So that's how each one of those situations has its own finite solution that needs to be considered.
Yeah. All right. So we've just talked about the benefits. Let's talk. If this is where most people get sloppy about what they're trying to do, swarm advantages aren't free. They come with increased communication requirements, exponential complexity, harder predictability, cascading failure modes. And the key is that the more autonomy you add, the less
Mm.
predictable the system actually becomes. You have 1,000 drones performing beautifully in simulation, and a single unmodulated interference collects collapse and confuses the coordination.
Yeah. Or imagine if you, in this case, one aircraft falls out of alignment. If your system doesn't have the redundancy to know, all right, what to do when you have one, two, three, four, or in this case, maybe 10 aircraft that fall out and they knock out others, if it's not at a place to where it's actually got that programmed into it to know, okay, I need to go here, I need to do this, or and say in a light show situation. Now, I haven't done it. This is just me from my own perspective, and it's just kind of give an idea so you can kind of think about it. If you're expecting this situation to be a specific pattern, and now you lost 10 of those, say 100 drones, how that impacts that show now is considerable. So it being able to can take into consideration on its own, or you having to take into consideration how to make that work is another solution that needs to be added into what you're trying to come up with your risk mitigations on your uh, design or your mission or whatever it is that you're doing your display, and that can be a lot. That could be a lot of work.
Yeah, no, I agree. I can't even imagine like the collectiveness that is needed to make sure that all of these things when the next one falls out and how you backfill. It's there's a lot of communication that has to happen between. So talking about that, let's move into like a congested electromagnetic environments. Like a real battlefield, swarms aren't just dealing with each other's signals; they're dealing with everything else that's out there. Friendly radio traffic, enemy communications, civilian infrastructures, the weather, the terrain, the multipath effects. I mean, AI that assumes everything is clean will fail. No doubt about that. This is more than hypothetical. It's the reality of any combat environment that we deal with and live in at this moment.
Yeah, and this is one, like, when you take consideration like all the signals, when you look at the different bands and how much clutter, like when you think about it, in your perspective, how many bands do you think that your systems typically are trying to negate between when you worked in those areas, like say the Q band, C band, X band, and all those? How much of a problem in your mindset do you think those become uh, a thought that needs to be considered in the future when it comes down to aircraft just functioning?
Yeah, I mean, for me, just thinking about it, like the communication between them, just the communication band. So when you're talking about your X band and everything that's being passed along between those guys, like what kind of network are they working on? How is their network? How are they communicating without getting the interference from like that's what interests me is like how are they able to communicate when you have that many, like you just mentioned light shows. I'm thinking about the time that we went to Disney and watched a light show at Disney, and there had to have been hundreds of those drones doing and
Hmm.
making the movements happen in the sky, and you're watching that and you're just like, this is amazing. But at the same time, I was too busy enjoying it to take in the thought of like, how did those guys communicate? Like,
Yeah,
what made them function to know exactly and like the time that it took to make that a thing? Like, to me, it blows my mind. Like, it's crazy how where we're at with drones and how they communicate and how they interact with each other. Because at that point, you're talking at that point true swarm mind activity.
yeah, and that's more so like programming. And when you look at that, that is the programming behind the scenes that is truly telling the aircraft, all right, at this position, you need to be here. And they may not always have sensors on them and I'm gonna do some more research into that one too to see whether they have sensors or they're just going by GPS. And I wouldn't be surprised they have sensors on them that are recognizing if they're within general location, because I've seen ones where they actually have pyrotechnics on these things and they're firing off pyrotechnics while they're actually flying.
Yeah.
So they have to have something that senses that that aircraft is with flying into a flame or something like that. It's doing what it still needs to do and it's still able to sense like, hey, I'm good. And just redundancy of if it falls out of the sky, all right, next man up, and how they shift. So that one's a software feat that is truly a amazing thing. Doing some of the work that I've done, we had it basic swarm situations. It wasn't a lot. It was just simplified, but the aircraft could be able to function just off of knowing where it was and it could communicate back and forth. And I've also seen to where when I was building aircraft where I power on a darn video transmitter and it shuts down our Wi-Fi, and understanding that that 1 watt was just enough to do that for ours. So I can imagine if that was happening with all these, because they need a decent amount of wattage. And even with flying, when they're
Yeah.
out doing race drone races, I've flown a couple times where I had a couple of millisecond, like a partial millisecond, where I'm flying through a circle or through what do you call it? Um,
Oops. Yeah.
yeah, hoops and stuff like that. And I know that in some areas where I'm coming through, I'm going to lose signal for a short time and it'll come back and you're still functioning. Granted, that's a human thing. For aircraft, it's more of ones and zeros. So it knows, all right, I'm going through, my next step is here. If I lose it, I'll calculate, recalculate, and keep going, and it can do it. And that is the cool part. With multiple aircraft able to do all this in a single instance, and in a lot of cases, not fail. You
Yeah.
know, and it is getting better. From the things I'm seeing, and just the off the shelf stuff that I can get right now. The cameras, the flight controllers, the sensors, this have gotten so much more better than what it was a few years ago. I was showing you the one camera the other day where it's the IR day camera, and it's at a place to where now, back in the day, you couldn't rely on those cameras as being a sensor to recognize how far in distance you were to the ground, like a sonic sensor, ultrasonic sensor, where basically it's sending a signal to the ground and bouncing back and coming back to it, and it's telling you what your altitude was so you can come down safely. And they weren't as reliable, but within a few years they've gotten more reliable. Now it's the place to where they're super reliable. It's like,
Yeah.
and all this stuff goes into a multitude of aircraft. You got 4 to 500. I think they had a thing where, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 150. Matter of fact, let me look this up real quick. Guinness World Book of Records for world record for swarm drones. Current record is 15,947 synchronized drones lighting up the sky in Beijing. So that was
That's
in
it's
China.
insane.
Yeah, almost 16,000 drones. So that's pretty cool that you can get that many drones up in the air and doing a light show at once. And at the same time, you got to think too what it's like when you have that many aircraft in the air, and imagine on the other side where you have that coming at you.
Right? What are you
Uh,
going to do?
yeah, 15,000 drones.
Yeah.
That literally, that's if you only had a company of say 100 people, 100 men, that many drones coming out, that's at least 10 per person. It's more than that at least, in magic, in math, but that's 10 at least coming at each individual person with a round at them to take that person out. And if it doesn't get it, one doesn't get them. They have multitudes that could come out and do the same thing. That's why it's scary now. Combat, what we've seen back in the day compared to what it is now, is a major difference between what it was and considered. We're literally in the Terminator era,
Yep.
literally.
Um, let's continue on with this conversation, talking about what the swarms coordinate with each other, right? So, at a high level, local interaction rules, shared state assumptions, heuristic consensus, and periodic synchronization. It's not magic, it's all math. But here's the catch: the more adaptive you make swarms, the more assumptions it has to make about neighbors, signals, goals, outcomes. Bad assumptions yield emergent chaos.
Yeah, and when you think about all that, like having a large number of swarm systems being controlled, typically your trans or not transmitter, your processor is what's communicating and doing most of that work. It's the main thing that actually helps that system to work, and also the communication. So the two main components when you think about it is whatever's sending the signals to each other and the processor that's working the function to do whatever it needs to do. If you have a processor that can do that work well and you have a uninterruptible system of communication, you're at a place to where you have a very good system. And where we are on computers now, I mean, a Raspberry Pi can do way more than what it was a few years back. And they've been just constantly getting better and better. The flight controllers we have now are getting smaller and better, less power needed, power intensive. So now it's almost about the software. The software is the next part, is having software that can run it. And then you also have the consideration of you have AI who's helping you to improve your systems to where you don't even have to worry about actually having all that knowledge. You just need to know what it needs, and you can keep improving it by vibe coding, just putting in the information you want it to do. So those three are the key factors that actually make a drone work on top of the sensors, because the sensors need to be able to give it. It's like it's feeling, like its eyes, ears, and mouth, so and nose that can recognize what's going on. And the main priority though is just like us, it's the brain, um, the main processor helps it to do whatever it needs to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, close this thing out and summarize the advantages of swarms for scalability, the redundancy, distributed tasking, cheap units, replaceable, expensive ones. The disadvantages are the communication overhead, the emergent unpredictability, susceptibility to interference, and harder to certify in a field. Swarms are not inherently better, they're different tools for different problems.
Agreed.
Now, this is why it matters to our leaders. When leaders think technology, they always view things as a shortcut, and that's a crutch. A swarm isn't a silver bullet. Heavy lift drones don't replace logistical discipline. AI isn't a magic brain. Technology is an amplifier of decisions you already understand. If you build assumption heavy tech, leaders are responsible when this fails. That's the core of our series arc. When technology becomes a leadership crutch, we'll unpack this theme again in the future episodes. We will be starting a series arc on this that will drop on Wednesdays. So here we go. Swarms are a paradigm shift, but not a pandemic. AI gives them coordination, but also creates complexity. If you don't understand the constraints, communication, interference, decision models, you don't understand swarms. And if you don't understand the limits of a hard lift and the trade offs of swarms bring, you're uncomfortable in the places where real decisions are being made right now. If this episode gave you a clearer framework for thinking about swarms, AI, share it with someone who assumes swarms equals advantage without cost.